I'm Patrick. I know a little bit about Python, not very much about Django or web development in general. So I signed up to be the guinea pig for this. So I guess how I'd approach it is I'd go to Google and I'd type in Django. And then we're going to go watch the movie. No, I'm just kidding. So yeah, I guess I'd pick this first one here. And let's see. Django makes it easier to build better web apps more quickly and with less code. That sounds exactly like what I want to do. So we can meet Django. Hey, let's just go ahead and download the latest release. Let's see. Okay. Oh, sweet. We can do a pip install. Okay. Interesting. Do we want to say that I know enough about Python that I'm going to create a virtual environment?
Up to you, man.
What do you guys think? A virtual environment? I have enough information to at least start with that.
I like your computer name, not pasta.
So this is my work laptop, and I get it, and it's like super locked down. I work for a cybersecurity company, and I was like, okay, host name, and I tried to change my host name, and it came with the name Pasta. And so I'm like, why does it have the name Pasta? And so I'm like trying to figure out how to change it without contacting the help desk because I think Pasta is the stupidest name on the planet. And then I saw that we have this Jamf board or something like that I can change my host name by clicking this thing. And the only thing that popped into my head was, since it was pasta and I didn't want it to be pasta, and thinking back to the whole hot dog, not hot dog from Silicon Valley, I just called it not pasta. So that's how I got my name. Anyways, sorry. So let's say I could probably do pip embed. We want to do this in 3. How about that? Is that because everybody should be writing in Python 3 now.
Python 3. The question, somebody asks you, should I use Python 2 or Python 3? Your answer should be Python 3.
So I already have pipenv installed. Pipenv, for those who don't know, is just a virtual environment manager that the community seems to embrace as the new way to do your requirements. So okay, we've got that. So let's go back to the tutorial here. We want to do pip install Django 2.1. But we know that since this is pipenv, we're going to do pipenv install. And man, of course I screwed that up. There we go. All right, so we're essentially doing the same thing, but just with pipenv instead of pip. Can everybody see that back there? Do I need to make this a little bigger?
Is pipenv just wrapping virtual environment?
It's doing a little bit of a lot of things. You'll see here in a second. Well, you can see it there. It has a pip file lock. So it's taking a little bit of what I guess the Node.js and Ruby community have done to kind of we can actually look at the pip file now. So we've got just it's a requirements file, but it's different. It's the new format of a requirements file. I think is maybe the best explanation.
The pip file keeps track of your dependencies, and the pip file.block keeps track of the transitive closure of your dependencies, which just is a fancy way of saying the whole tree of dependencies and all of their specific versions. So that if you want to install it, you'll get all the exact packages that he did when he was writing the system.
Yeah, you see there for Django, we have the SHA-256 sum of the actual package that I told it to install. I don't know why it has 2 different SHAs there. I don't know. You can find out. That wouldn't be very much about Django, though. All right. I guess I could have done a git clone. Okay. After we get okay, see the installation guide. For further instructions, make sure you read the documentation that corresponds to the version of Django that you've just installed. We want to see the installation guide.
Seems reasonable.
Let's go to the installation. Install Python. We've already done that. That's fine. Set up a database. Ooh. Do we want to set up a database? We could probably, if you want a large database, okay. So we don't need to do that for this. That's fine. I think we've gotten the official release. That's what I just did. Oh, let's verify it. Let's do that. I'm gonna get into a pipenv shell just so I don't have to do any other crazy things. What was that?
I love that you're on a track that I already did not predict.
What's that? What are you talking about?
We should go back to the home page in a second.
Okay. Yay, look, we got the right version. So it sees that we have Django installed, or we have Django available. And that's it. Oh, we can move on to the tutorial. Do we want to do that? What track were you thinking?
Oh, right on the site, you read the big like headline.
Yeah.
And there's a gigantic button it's like right underneath it that says make your web app or something like that. I'm just surprised that get started with Django. That's
what I clicked.
No, you went down. You went install Django and went to the installation guide. So it's interesting.
Oh, okay. Well, what do you want to do? You want to go to the tutorial, or do you want to click on
You're
this?
driving, man. I just.
This looks like it's the same tutorial.
It's just funny to me that it was easy to miss this like gigantic. I do it all the time.
Yeah.
Like you're not alone. Like this happens to me regularly. Like if the button is too big, I actually like look through it somehow.
Yeah. Two big buttons. I like underlined text.
Yeah, something.
The underline. I think because I don't know. Maybe since I'm in the terminal so much, I notice underlined text more than I do big ass buttons that say click me. Maybe, I don't know. Writing your first Django app part 1. Let's learn by example. Through this tutorial, we'll walk through the creation of a basic poll application. That should be pretty good. Ooh, we can do the version again. We already just did that. We know we have 2.1 installed. If Django is installed, we know that Django is installed, so that's good. This tutorial is written for Django 2.1 and supports Python 3.5. Let's make sure I've got at least Python 3.5. 3.6, close enough. Let's see. No, I don't need to find out what version I can use with Django, how to install Django. I've already gotten that. Creating a project. Here we go. This is getting exciting. So we did that pip env install. So I think what we've now got, since we know we have Django installed, I should be able to run this Django admin start project my site, right? So in your first time using Django, you'll have to take care of some initial setup. Namely, you'll need to auto-generate some code that establishes a Django project. So from the command line, cd in the directory where you would like to store your code, then run the following command. Right? Does that look right to everyone? Didn't say that it did anything. Let's see what it says. Hey, we've got a my site folder. That's cool. This will create a my site directory. We have that. Very cool. Yeah. So we don't need to do the problems running Django admin. You need to avoid naming projects after built-in Python or Django components. Makes sense. Where should this code live? If your background is in plain old PHP, get out. I'm just kidding. Probably used to putting code under web server's document root, such as var www. Django, you don't need to do that. It's not a good idea to put any of this code within your web server's document root. That's a very valid thing to put there. It's pretty smart because yeah, I could see somebody put that in like var www, and I assume there's some administrative things that you wouldn't want to get out there.
Yeah.
let's look at what start project created. We should have a my site folder, a manage Pi, and then another my site folder. Okay, so full disclosure, many moons ago, I did this tutorial. Why does it have a my site folder and then a my site underneath it?
I think the idea is that top level my site, you would make that as your Git project.
Yeah.
So you could do, like, there's a flag or an option to that start project thing that lets you specify the directory that you want to create. So you could name the project my site, but say, I want to specify dot, which is another way of saying the current directory.
I got you.
So yeah, and that's usually what I do. Like all the contents that are in that my site, I just pull them up a higher level if I was doing this as a real project.
Because I assume when I go LSLAH, my site, then we've got the manage Pi, yep, and my site underneath there. Well, we don't need to worry about moving that. That's fine. So we should have the outer my site root directory is just a container for your project. This name doesn't matter to Django. You can rename it to whatever. Interesting. Manage Pi, command line utility that lets you interact with this Django project. The inner my site directory is the actual Python package for your project. Its name is a Python package name you'll need to use to import anything. Interesting. I didn't realize that Django was actually creating itself as a package that would be importable to itself. Init Pi, an empty file that tells Python this is the directory should be considered a Python package. Makes sense. Settings Pi, setting and configuration for the Django project. URLs.py, the URL declarations for the Django project, and WSGI. Is that WSGI?
Yep.
Entry point for the WSGI compatible web servers. That's so you could run it on like Nginx or something, right?
It's for GUnicorn and GWSGI. It's the standard interface that all Python web applications, not all, most Python web applications are using to run.
Interesting. Let's verify your Django project works, changing into the outer my site directory if you haven't already, and run the following command: Python manage Pi run server. This will be interesting. What's that? Python manage. I have very short-term memory. There we go. 15 unapplied migrations, but I can go to this location here, it looks like. Well, I'll be. That's the end. See ya. We have a, looks like we have a successful Django web app. That's very cool. Should see the following output on the command line. We did. Saw performing system checks. Yep. We had no issues. That's cool. And we had some unapplied migrations. Makes sense. And we went to the site. That's cool. Started a Django development server, a lightweight web server written purely in Python. We've included this with your Django, so you can develop things rapidly without having to deal with configuring a production server such as Apache, till you're ready for production. Now the server is running at that location. You'll see a congratulations page. Ooh, we can change the port. I wonder what that looks like. Can we just, yeah, we can Control C to end it. All right, 8080. Should get the same thing, but this time on a different port. Yeah. Very cool.
Do you think we need to take a second to explain what a port is?
Anybody have a question about what the port difference was there? No, okay. Just that we were able to, via this command here, it looks like we can specify the port that the run server runs on. And so in this case, it's defaulted to 8,000. Then I just told it to run on 8080. That's just the port that it gets exposed on. Some sort of built-in feature with the web server.
Can you run it on 2 ports simultaneously?
You can start up a different run server on a different process. Yeah.
Yeah, but can you run the same server on 2 different ports? Like listen on 2 different ports?
I don't think so.
We actually have to do that for some servers. We have to listen on 80 and 8080. It has to be the same server.
Yeah, I mean, the note at the beginning of this was like, this is not intended for like a production usage. It's just for if you're doing the local development. So if you want to move on to an actual production deployment, you integrate with a production-ready Django web server, which they tell you how to do later, which I presume could run on multiple ports.
We can also specify the IP address if we wanted. It's all dependent upon your machine's configuration. But if I think in the default here, we have it exposed on 127.0.0.1. We could expose it on 0.0.0.0, which would be all of the IP addresses available on the system. Not necessarily automatic reloading of run server. Development server automatically reloads Python code. Okay, that's cool. So when we make changes to our code, we can just keep the run server running in the background, it sounds like, and it'll continue to reload our changes. Creating the polls app. Now that your environment, a project, is set up, you're set to start doing work. Each application you write in Django consists of a Python package that follows a certain convention. That makes sense. So I guess the key point here is that Django is setting up a specific way in which everything is set up so that it will load it properly. I guess that makes sense. Django comes with a utility that automatically generates the basic directory structure of the app so you can focus on writing code rather than creating directories. That's pretty good. It's the difference between a project and an app. An app is a web application that does something. Weblogs. A project is a collection of configurations and apps for a particular website. Your apps can live anywhere on your Python path, and this tutorial will create our poll app right next to your managed Py so that it can be imported into its own top-level module rather than a sub-module of my site. Makes sense. So to create it, we need to run this start app polls. That sounds like it'll create this in this same location right next to it, right? Guess so. Hey, look at that. So we now have a polls directory, which should look like that. That looks the same.
Do you have tree installed?
Nope. Yeah, I couldn't install it, I guess. This directory structure will house the poll application. So yeah, that looks like we've got a poll. That's pretty good. Let's write our first view. I'm gonna write our first view, open the file pollsviews.py, and put the following Python code in it. All of that the same? Yeah. Okay. I assume we don't need to delete that import render. Or we could if we wanted to, I guess. Well, it says it should look like that, so I'm going to take that out. It's the simplest view possible in Django. To call the view, we need to map a URL to it. Map it to a URL. For this, we need a URL conf. To create a URL conf in the polls directory, create a file called urls.py. Your app directory should now look like this. So we need to create a urls.py in that top of polls. Hey, look at that. We've got a urls.py. In urls.py, include the following code. So it looks like we're just pasting in some boilerplate code that's setting up our stuff here. I'm hoping they explain what all this means, because I'm not sure what that means. All right. Next step is to point the root URL conf to the polls.urls module in mysiteurls.py. Add an import for Django URLs include and insert an include in the URLs pattern list so you have that. Interesting. So in mysiteurls, that's not at all what's in the interesting. I guess we can remove all this. Paste. Yeah, okay. So I removed everything that was in that file, and we at least still have the path admin, which I assume is some sort of path to admin. And now a new path to polls, which is calling the include of polls URLs. All right, the include function allows referencing other URL confs. Whenever Django encounters include, it chops off whatever part of the URL matched up to that point and sends the remaining string to the included URL conf for further processing. The idea behind include is to make it easy to plug and play URLs. Since polls are in their own URL conf, polls/urls.py, they can be placed under polls, well, /polls/ or under /fun_polls. So it's able to capture multiple types of URLs based on that entry there, or under /content/polls, or any other path root, and the app will still work. Should always use include when you include other URL patterns, admin, site URLs, and is the only exception to this. You have now wired an index view to the URL conf. Let's verify it's working by running the following command. We're going to run that server again. It's exciting. Anybody else super excited?
Yes.
You should be able to go to that URL again. Let's click this and see what happens. Now, let's open that up in a new link. Sweet. Hello world, you're in the polls index. You're at the polls index. It seems to work. Hey, we're not getting a page not found. That's good. The path function is passed 4 arguments. 2 required, route and view, and 2 optional, kWargs and name. At this point, it's worth reviewing what these arguments are for. I want to see. Cool. I was going to ask what kWargs are, but it talks about it, so that's good. Path argument route is a string that contains a URL pattern. When processing a request, Django starts at the first pattern in URL patterns and makes its way down the list, comparing the requested URL against each pattern until it finds one that matches. Patterns don't search get or post parameters or the domain name. For example, in the request https://www.example.com/myapp, the URL conf will look for myapp. In a request to same things, question page equals 3, the URL conf will also look for my app. Come on. There we go. View. When Django finds a matching pattern, it calls the specific view function with an HTTP request object as the first argument and any captured views from the route as keyword arguments. We'll give an example of this in a bit. We? Like we will or they will?
I'd like to see an example where it does something with an argument that's passed into along the URL. Like, just print the argument out on the page or something like that.
I think it's getting there. We got to read about kWargs first, and then we're going to do exactly that, Robbie. Path argument kWargs, arbitrary keyword arguments. I've always wondered what kWargs stood for. It stands for keyword arguments. I did not know that. I probably could have Googled that, but I just figured I'd figure it out one day. No sense in Googling.
Monday is today.
Yeah. Yeah. Arbitrary keyword arguments can be passed in a directory or dictionary to the target view. We aren't going to use this feature of Django in this tutorial. And argument name. Naming your URL lets you refer to it unambiguously. That's a big word. From elsewhere in Django, especially from within templates. This powerful feature allows you to make global changes to the URL patterns of your project while only touching a single file. That sounds very useful.
Yeah, the idea behind it, so up above when it had polls and it had full polls, by giving it a name, you're giving it an extra hook to say, like, I don't care what you defined as the actual URL. I just want to connect to like the concept of this URL. So that way you don't have to, like, if you ever decided to change from polls to full polls, you don't have to go updating all your code. You just refer to the consistent name as your reference. So it's that reference is less likely to change compared to a URL name.
When you're comfortable with this basic request and response flow, read part 2 of this tutorial to start working with a database. So that sounds like fun. How's this? Is everybody, is this format okay? I'm happy to talk faster, slower, ask more questions, ask less questions, just click buttons. Cool. All right. Part 2. I got to learn how to like actually click on this thing. So like this is the first time I'm demoing from a Mac, and I've only been using a Mac for like 2 months. I hate it. I really do. I'm my thumb and this finger, because I don't want to switch control and command, because when I use the Mac keyboard on my desk, it doesn't switch. I don't know why. It's stupid. I thought Macs just work, but they don't. Take that, Steve Jobs. Writing your first Django app, part 2. This tutorial begins where tutorial 1 left off. We'll set up a database, create your first module, and get a quick introduction to Django's automatically generated admin site. Ooh, that sounds interesting. Now open up my site settings.py. It's a normal Python module with module level variables representing Django settings. By default, the configuration uses SQLite, which we noticed when we did a LS on this. We saw a DB SQLite 3. If you're new to databases or you're just interested in trying Django, this is the easiest choice. SQLite is included in Python, so you won't need to install anything else to support your database. In starting your first real project, however, you may want to use more scalable databases like Postgres, but stay away from MongoDB. It says it. It said that. No, on my screen it says it. Let's take a look at my site settings.py. Yeah, imports OS, a whole bunch of other stuff here. If I didn't have, I could probably just make this more viewable for folks if I exited, and
You're in the indirect right now, I think.
oh, thanks. Damn function key. There we go. So I had the pipenv preventing me or showing setting up a Python shell, but I was losing the visuals that Vim was giving. So I figured, at least for now, we'll go. Oh, still doesn't have any visuals. All right. Well, whatever. Go back. Okay.
If you want that while you're in the file, you could do colon, syntax, space, and colon.
Hey, look at that. That's pretty sweet. Oh, don't look at my secret key. All right. If you wish to use another database and install an appropriate database bindings, you can change the following keys in database's default item to match your database connection settings. You can do we should see a SQLite 3, shouldn't we? Under engine. Hey, look at that. SQLite 3. That's good. I realized I just said SQLite. It's SQLite 3.
I never know how to say it.
School.
Some people say SQLite.
SQL.
Like, there's all different variants.
There's only one L. It's not SQLite. It's fine.
SQLite.
Light. All right. Yeah, we could put other engines in there for Postgres, MySQL, Oracle. I don't know why'd you use that, but okay. What other backends do we have available? That should be an interesting look. What the heck is Firebird? Django Firebird. I've never heard of Firebird before. Never going to use it. Name of the database. If you're using SQLite, the database will be a file on your computer. In that case, name should be a full absolute path, which is because there's a file called db.sqlite, SQLite3. If you're not using SQLite as your database, additional settings such as user, password, host must be added. For those details, we don't need to worry about them, but that makes sense because we would actually need to know how to connect to it. I think, did that show in here? I don't think it said anything in here. Okay. Oh, while you're editing my site settings.py, set time zone to your time zone. Let's take a look at that. UTC. We are not in UTC. Can we click on time zone and figure out how to set the right time zone? Yeah. Let's see, default. That's not the default. Default's UTC.
The default, if you don't have that variable defined in your settings, is America, Chicago.
But it says default, UTC. Oh, okay, I get what
It's
you're
like
saying.
not-
If you don't,
gone.
if I were to remove this, it would change it to America, Chicago.
And the reason for that is Django originally came from Lawrence, Kansas. Did they list it?
Since Django was first released with the time zone set of American Chicago. Oh, no, never mind.
That's because Lawrence, Kansas is in Central Time.
Okay,
America, Chicago.
interesting.
It's part of a newspaper. It was made by a newspaper company.
Huh, interesting. Does this give us a list of time zones that we can use? Or do I just wing it and put America?
America.
Is it?
It's underscore.
Is, all right. We're in America time zone, New York. Okay. We don't need to know any of that other stuff. go back to this. Okay. Also note the installed app setting at the top of the file. That holds the name of all the Django applications that are activated in this instance. Let's take a look at that. Admin, auth, content types, sessions, messages, static files. I don't see polls.
Yeah, I wondered how that worked, because in the past, I feel like you had to include that. Maybe they changed that in 2.1. I don't know.
But so I guess you have to include it because it's not there.
Normally you do.
Huh. See if it says anything about it. I bet, well, I don't know. By default, installed apps contains the following apps. Oh no, because it actually worked perfectly fine and we didn't include it in
Right,
the
that's what I'm
installed
curious
apps.
about. Like maybe because it was on your path and you had to do something.
Interesting.
That seemed to do to me. Like, I mean, I thought in the past, like this could just be a relic of Django's past, that there was a step to go in there and say, like, you have to tell installed apps that I want to use this polls app.
Yeah, you used to.
Okay, maybe that's just a new nice feature that they're able to cut that work out.
So we have Django contrib. Is it really how you pronounce it? Contrib. Admin, which is the admin site. We'll use it shortly. I'm excited. Who else is excited? It's the admin site. It's exciting. It comes with its own authentication system and content types, sessions. Wonder if like how badly you could screw up your Django app by removing sessions.
I've actually worked on a Django app that didn't have sessions.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Huh.
Because it was a proxy for another like API.
Okay.
So we just didn't need it.
Messages, is that like being able to like just have a message queue bus inside of it? No?
It's different kind of messages.
Like text messages? No, like
Not that either.
sorry, no. I thought there was. We talked about this a while ago. Django, I thought, included a new way to do. I don't remember. We had the guy that wrote it.
WebSockets.
WebSockets. Yeah.
So there's channels.
Channels.
That's what you're thinking of.
It's
So
not messages.
messages is like when you fill out a form, you get a little flash, a little message that pops up after you saying like, "Congratulations, you filled out our form." That's called a flash message in the
Got it.
lingo that's in here. So that's what that app is for.
Got it. And static files. Managing static files. Makes sense. These applications are included by default as a convenience for the common case. Some of these applications make use of at least one database table though, so we'll need to create the tables in the database before we can use them. To do that, run the following command. I find it interesting that we can include those, but they don't actually screw anything up without having their tables, so that's interesting. Okay. Manage.py migrate.
I think it's just because we didn't use a view that used them.
Hey, look at that. And some migrations. That's super cool. I've always thought like very good migration systems are the greatest thing ever.
Makes your life easier.
Yeah. All right.
Hopefully they talk about what migrations are.
Hopefully. The migrate command looks at the installed app setting and creates any necessary database tables according to the database settings in your mysitesettings.py file. And the database migrations shipped with the app. We'll cover those later. You'll see a message for each migration it applies. If you're interested, run the command client for your database and type /dt for Postgres. We should be able to get into the schema for SQLite. No. Why didn't that work?
I don't think you opened the database file.
Oh yeah. Does anybody remember the file name?
db.sqlite3.
Hey, look at that. We've got some schemas. That's pretty good. Quit. There we go. I got out. I'm okay.
How do you quit them?
All of the letters.
Still the most popular question on Stack Overflow. How do you quit? Yeah.
Did I ever tell you the story about how I got into using Vim?
I don't think so.
Anybody else hear this? So it's maybe like 4 or 5, maybe closer to 5 years ago now. I was a big Nano guy. I used Nano all the time. And one of my coworkers is a big Vim guy. And I came in one day, he would bash me all the time for using Nano. Like he'd just see me using Nano and he would cringe. And I came in one day and he had printed the Vim manual and lined my cubicle with all of the pages because it was like 100 and some odd pages. And so my cubicle was just lined with the Vim manual. And that made me realize I should probably learn Vim. So I know enough. He doesn't make fun of me anymore for it. I don't talk to him anymore. For the minimalists, like we said above, default applications are included, but not everybody needs them. If you don't need them, feel free to comment them out. Interesting. So we could, if we wanted to, since we're not using them, we could, right now we could comment all of those out, maybe? In theory. We won't worry about that. Creating models. Now we'll define your models, essentially your database layout with additional metadata. Philosophy: a model is a single definitive source of truth about your data. It contains the essential fields and behaviors of your data you're storing. Django follows the DRI principle. I don't know what the DRI principle is. Don't repeat yourself. DRI. That makes complete sense. Every distinct concept or piece of data should live in one and only one place. Redundancy is bad, normalization is good. I don't know what that has to do with DRI. And if they don't have something like a wet principle after that, then they've completely screwed it up.
Is wet the anti-pattern?
I guess. That's my principle. I'm gonna just make there's probably write everything twice.
Very nice.
This includes the migrations. Unlike in Ruby on Rails, for example, migrations are entirely derived from your models file. All right. In our simple poll app, we'll create 2 models, question and choice. A question has a question and a publication date. A choice has 2 fields. The text of the choice and a vote tally. Each choice is associated with a question. These concepts are represented, close enough. By simple Python classes, edit the polls model file so it looks like this. Definitely need to.
I think there's a little copy button.
Yeah, perfect. I'm still thinking about that. Write everything twice. That was funny. All right. So we're importing the Django DB models. We're creating a class of questions and a class of choice. That's good. That's good. I need to save that. This code is straightforward. Each model is represented by a class that subclasses Django DB models model. Each model has a number of class variables, each of which represents a database field in the model. Each field is represented. Why do they got this word that I can't pronounce like 1,000 times in this thing? Represented by an instance of field. English is my first language. I don't know why that just seems like a weird thing for me to say. Each field is represented by a instance of field class, e.g., that's ergo, right? What? No, but I mean, EG, doesn't it stand for?
Exempted,
Oh, somebody went to college. Char field for character fields and date time field for date times. This tells Django what type of data each field holds. That seems like it'd be a good idea to like use things that only the database knows how to properly use. The name of each field instance, e.g., question text or pub date, is the field's name in a machine-friendly format. What's an unfriendly format for a machine?
Well, in Python, it would be like if you used a dash, because that would be like minus. So Python wouldn't recognize that as an identifier. So you have to use a variable name. I'm thinking that's what they're getting.
Yeah. You'll use this value in your Python code, and your database will use it as the column name. You can use an optional first positional argument to a field to designate a human readable name. That's used in a couple of introspective parts of Django, and it doubles as documentation because documentation is a good thing. If this field isn't provided, Django will use the machine readable name. In this example, we've only defined a human readable name for question.pub_date. For all other fields in this model, the field's machine readable name will suffice as its human readable name. Some field classes have required arguments. Char field, for example, requires that you give it a max length. That's used not only in the database schema, but in validation, as we'll soon see. A field can also have various optional arguments. In this case, we've set the default value of votes to 0. Finally, note a relationship is defined using foreign key that tells Django each choice is related to a single question. Django supports all the common database relationships, many-to-one, many-to-many, and one-to-one. What the heck did that actually just mean? So, yeah, okay. We're importing, we created some class of models model. Question text takes the model char field and passes it a max length of 200. Creates also a pub date, models date time field, and it calls it date published, right? Is that what that's saying?
Yeah, so are you asking about the foreign key?
I was getting there.
Okay.
Foreign key under the class choice, that's the, allows it to have that many-to-one or one-to-many or many-to-many relationship between what will end up being the question and the choice. All right, and then yeah, at the bottom there, default is 0 for votes. For any of those that are going to use Django to create the scoreboard for the hackathon, we'll want to make sure you set default to 1000 for any team that I'm on. Thank you.
So I have a question for you, Matt.
Sure.
Do you notify the database of a not null value or not null scenario?
You can.
You can be hacked.
Right. So by default, these fields will assume that you will provide values, and they will actually fail validation, which we'll probably get to, if you don't provide them the right values. So it's enforcing those database constraints. If you want to permit a null value in your database, one of the options for many of these fields is a null keyword argument. So you say null equal true, and then you're allowed to store null database values for that table. I think they don't show it immediately because they want to encourage you to not do that because it helps the integrity of your database. The fewer nulls that you can have in there, the easier time you're going to have for making sure that things cascade properly when you delete, and referencing data is a lot more straightforward without nulls.
That small bit of module code gives Django a lot of information. With it, Django is able to create a table and create Python database access API, create a Python database access API for accessing question and choice objects. Oh, that's pretty good. Oh, here we go. First, we'll need to tell the project that the polls app is installed. So we still do need to do this. That's pretty interesting. To include the app in our project, we'll need to add a reference to its configuration class in the installed apps settings. So we want to go back to My Site, Settings Py, and add polls apps, polls config.
Now it sounds like we're adding it because we have migrations.
I think
Because they're
so.
relevant to data.
Yeah, it's hooking into different parts. And I think that's starting to make sense now, because before, we were literally just importing a view that Django was going to use, and it said that the polls app was on the Python path. So you did a module import, and there's nothing that that view was using that was crazy. It was just a pure HTTP response with a raw string. So it's really just a function that is returning normal Django stuff. So I think that makes sense of why it didn't fail.
It'd probably be pretty uncommon to see an app, if I'm understanding the terminology right, that didn't have some type of data access.
Right.
Right, unless it was just static pages or something like that. Okay.
Now Django knows to include the polls app. Let's run another command. We're going to make some migrations. Why? Single click. There we go. Hey, we have created a model choice and a model of question, and we add a field question to choice. Awesome. That's what we saw. By running make migrations, you are telling Django that you've made some changes to your models. In this case, you've made new ones, and you'd like the changes to be stored as a migration. Migrations are how Django stores changes to your models and thus your database schema. They're just files on a disk. You can read the migration for your new model if you would like. Let's take a look at that. Polls, migrations, 001 initial. Hey, awesome. So it's a Python script. It's another part of the actual Django app that's Python that knows how to, it's its own class that knows how to migrate the database. Huh. Very interesting.
So if that initial equals true, that one indicative of each app being able to roll back the data model? Like if I just wanted to, if I were on my third migration, for example, in the polls app, could I roll back just that part of the database, even though it's all the same?
Yep.
It's the same SQLite or Postgres clients.
That's pretty powerful. The migration system, its both default mechanisms, if you have a pretty standard migration of just adding fields, all of its operations are reversible. So you can go back and forth. I mean, it might destroy data, like if you added a field and reversed it, and you cared about some of the data you put in there, you just dropped your data, so be careful. But yeah, the system is pretty robust.
Some similarities in Rails, but I don't think that there isn't like quite the same concept of an app in Rails. This definitely seems more powerful.
From what I understand about Rails too, you have to write more SQL yourself. Like it's a bit more on you. Like this is derived from the model, whereas I think, and you maybe you'll correct me, I thought that Rails was more like, okay, you have a model and you reference it, but you're really writing the SQL to go forward and backwards yourself.
If you use the scaffolding in it, it'll do the same thing, like make
Okay.
a migration. But I'm sure there are cases where you need to write more raw SQL. It's supposed to be convention based, like this data model is.
There's a command that will run migrations for you and manage your database schema automatically. That's called migrate. And we'll come to it in a moment. But first, let's see what SQL that migration would run. The SQL migrate command takes the migration names and runs their SQL. I'm not quite sure I understand what that even said, but let's see what it does. Oh, helps if I... There we go. Ah, so it's It's actually going in and it's showing us the SQL that it's going to create to actually run against the database.
Yeah, so it takes the knowledge of the engine that you have in your settings file and the fact that the migration syntax is kind of a domain-specific language and says, you know, I know what you want for SQLite 3. Here's the actual create table statements that'll do it. So that's what the migration system is actually doing when you actually run the migrate command. It's just iterating through each of the statements, and that comes out of SQL migrate.
So I mean, is it actually executing the statements, or is it just giving the statements you get over here?
It's just showing it.
For our purposes, SQL migrate is just showing us what migrate will
Yeah.
do.
Should see something similar to the following. We've reformatted it for readability. Should have just showed this page. Note the following, the exact output will vary depending on your database you are using. The above is generated for Postgres. Table names are automatically generated by combining the name of the app polls and the lowercase name of the model. Primary key IDs are added automatically. You can override this. By convention, Django appends ID to the foreign key field. If you're interested, you can run manage py check. This checks for any problems in your project without making modifications. Let's do that. Let's just see what it does. Sweet, no issues. All right, let's do this migration. Hey, we've applied the polls 0001 underscore initial, and it's okay. Migrate command takes all the migrations that haven't been applied. Django tracks which ones are applied using a special table in your database called Django Migrations, and runs them against your database, essentially synchronizing the changes you made to your models with the schema in the database. Migrations are very powerful and let you choose your models over time, change your models over time as you develop your project without needing to delete your database or tables and make new ones. It specializes in upgrading your database live without losing data. Yeah, right. I mean, good on them for saying that, but I don't believe it. I'm confident everybody has problems with live updates to databases without losing data.
You're the real world DevOps guy. You know better.
I'm just saying, I mean, come on. It's great, like good marketing thing, but not gonna happen. Sorry, back on track. Let's see. Let's cover them in more depth later in the tour, but for right now, remember the 3-step guide to making model changes. Change your model, run make migrations, and then migrate. The reason there are 3 separate commands to make and apply migrations is because you'll commit migrations to your version control system and ship them with your app. They not only make your development easier, they're also usable by other developers and in production. Very cool. Playing with the API. Now I'm excited. Oh, hey, manage.py. Manage.py is like a super powerful command.
It's your entry point to everything.
They need to say that up front. Like, they didn't say that. It's just like I use manage.py for everything.
I got a question actually for Matt. What kind of strategy do you use for version? You run the website Storybook, right? Assuming you've got a big code base, you've got a big database too, right?
Yep.
What strategy do you use for version controlling your code and your database? Because with this, like you're migrating some data model, suddenly your database is completely different from the older versions of the code. If you wanted to roll back some change, do you like take a snapshot of the entire database before you push a version code or something?
Yeah, so we treated the Django migrations as the source of truth of like what our data model is supposed to represent. And that meant that for new fields to the database, that was like a trivial thing, like, okay, just add a field, no big deal. If you're ever deleting stuff, basically it's required more thought of, we're gonna know we're dropping this field, we're losing data, and we have to prepare for that. So there wasn't like a specific, we treat the database like super specially, like we treated the Django code and the migrations as the thing that was sacrosanct, and that, you know, we trusted Django's migrations would do the right thing when it ran. I don't know if that fully answers your question, or if there's more that you're looking at.
It still doesn't sound like there's a good way to like roll it back. So I kind of like these. I've been using Hugo, it's a static site generator,
Yeah.
and that's nice because the entire site is in code. Everything is there. If I ever need to roll it back, I just if I ever need to roll back anything,
Right.
I can just go back to a particular git and commit, and it's there. Of course, it doesn't have all the interactivity you could have with a live server. That's what I was wondering, like how you could do this with a live server. So,
Yeah, you just have to think more about, am I really going to drop this data? Because you can't use Hugo I mean, you can for a site that has millions of users. They can have kind of read only, but millions of users that are adding content
Right.
to the site is not something that Hugo is designed for.
right.
And so in that case, your database is going to be full of data, and you need to be thinking about it when you're deciding what am I going to remove from this, if anything, and just have a little bit more thought in that process.
So it sounds like don't roll back.
You know, it's
Yes.
that's your business. Like,
No, yes, don't roll back. Always fail forward.
it's a reasonable strategy.
Playing with the API. Oh, now we're getting into some fun here. Let's hop into the interactive Python shell and play around with the free API Django gives you. To invoke the Python shell, use this command, python manage PyShell. So I'm in a virtual environment shell, now going to go into the Django shell. Hey, awesome.
And for folks that are not familiar, so this is just the Python interpreter shell that has been bootstrapped with the right Django imports that's ready to work with your models. So there's nothing really magical about this. It's not like Django wrote their own shell as well. So it's really just like the interpreter, and can be customized in the same way of, like, if you use BPython or one of these other interpreters, you can actually hook into that as well. So it's just doing the fancy loading.
We're using this instead of typing Python because
Okay.
manage.py sets the Django settings module environment variable, which gives Django the Python import path to your my site settings file.
I should just let him read.
It's all good. I told you, Django tutorial. It's like
It's good.
pretty good. So let's go, let's run this from polls import choice question, and we should actually import the module classes we just wrote. And then we can do question objects all. We should get back a query set that's empty. Hey. Oh, hey, look, we're going to pull in the time zone. Is that going to pull in our time zone since we changed it to New York?
I believe so.
What? What if I typed time zone wrong? That'd be pretty good. We're going to interact directly with the database on this one. So the question text, we're going to add a question text, what's new, and the publication date of time zone dot now. And save the object into the database. And QID, so we can see the ID. Access the model field values via Python attributes. Oh, we can see the actual question text that we just inputted. And that's actually, is that actually interacting with the database now? Or is that still going off of the queue that I created up above here?
I believe what it's doing is you created the instance and the save call did the commit to the database. And so at this point where you're messing around with these things, like
It's still
the
part
save-
of question.
So if you had created question and you hadn't saved it yet, q.id would not have a value yet because it wasn't committed.
Okay.
So that's showing like we have a new row in the database and this is the ID that we auto incremented and gave it. The rest of these parameters are like in your local instance.
It's going to have us change values anyways. Let's look at queue pub date. Yep. Let's save this question.
Tab completion in the show.
Probably not.
I think it depends on if readline is built with the.
Oh, yes.
Try something like pub. Is that one of the, oh yeah, that's correct. Cool.
Just to double check.
So the interpreter by default is built with a readline library, which is I think it's a bash thing, or I don't remember exactly, but if your version of Python is not built and compiled with readline support, that actually won't work. It's sort of a pain if you're like on a super lockdown system and you need to get in there and shell and you try and tab complete and it just jumps over like 20 characters, whatever.
That's it.
So we're going to change the question text from what's new to what's up. Now we should see. So that is not saved to the database. It's saying what's up is and if we do q.save, that saved it to the database. Well, now we can do question. Hey, we have a question object. Wait a minute.
There was someone presented there was some package or some product that you could wrap around these web frameworks to put them in a microservice like AWS and Lambda. Can you do that with Django?
Yes. In fact, I've used that. And he told me about it.
What was that?
It's called Zappa.
Zappa. It's pretty sweet.
That is pretty sweet.
Wait a minute. Question object 1 isn't helpful representing this object. Let's fix that by editing the question model and adding a string method to both question and choice. That's pretty good. So we want to add that to the polls models.py. Let's go ahead and exit. We need to add that, right? Yeah. And a def stir. And this is just adding a single additional definition of a function that is returning the self-question text when we call the question and choice, right?
And this is, well, okay, maybe it says it. I'll let you read before I say it.
It's important to add __, str __, quotes. It's a very strange way to talk. Methods to your models, not only for your own convenience when dealing with the interactive prompt, but also because object representations are used throughout Django's automatically generated admin. Note, these are normal Python methods. Let's add custom methods just for demonstration. Oh, interesting.
They're usually referred to as magic methods. And sometimes instead, because it's a mouthful, say underscore str. So we sometimes just shorten them to dunder, for double underscore. So dunder stir would be the magic method name.
Not to be confused with Dunder Mifflin.
Yes, not to be confused. But that's not that's not a Django specific thing. You can do that on any Python class. And if you have a dunder stir method defined, it's a hook that tells Python, like, if you try to print that, use the print function and try and print an instance of that object, it will look for a dunder stir thing. If that exists, it'll call that to give the what print should return.
Huh, didn't know that. So we're going to add, it looks like another, what are these called again?
Model.
Oh, no, it says it up here. Custom method. Another custom method for was published recently. Under polls models. Need to add some more includes of time zone and date time. We can take this other one out. And want to add if it was published recently. Is that a question? Yeah, question. This was published recently is returning a self-pub date that's greater than or equal to timezone.now minus datetime.time delta days equals 1. So it's doing some math, taking the time zone now and subtracting using the datetime time delta, subtracting 1 day from time zone now.
So saying is your pub date, the way times work is 0 is the oldest time. And time's always moving forward. So if your pub date is greater than yesterday, that's what that code is saying.
It'll return.
Now minus a day, yesterday. Then you're recent, considered published recently.
Okay. Note the addition of import date time from Django utils import time zone to reference Python's standard datetime module and Django's time zone related utilities and Django utils time zone respectively. If you aren't familiar with the time zone handling in Python, you can learn more at time zone support docs. Everybody that just read that should probably click on that because nobody knows anything about actually time zones in Python. They're confusing. I'm just kidding.
There's a whole PyCon talk about like a time zone primer.
Yeah.
I tried to watch it. I mean, props to the guy. Like he gave a lot of depth, but
yeah. After
about like 15 minutes, though, my head was swimming in
because
terminology.
It's like randomly changing at all times.
Yeah, it's a really complicated subject.
Places like Indiana say, who cares about time zones? And then Arizona is like, oh, we care about time zones, but only like this quarter of the century.
That's
and
not even half the weirdness.
I know,
like
I know.
Some countries are just
yeah
bizarre.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool, but but time is hard.
Yeah. All right, we're gonna manage .py shell again. And we're gonna do the question objects all. Oh wait, we have to do the import first. Import these choice and questions, and then question objects all. To get that, make sure our dunder stir dunder. It's my new favorite word, dunder. Hey, look at that. That's much better than it was before, because previously we got this response back. Now we get this response back. That's pretty good. We can filter on an ID number. We only have one ID, so we should just get that one back. And, oh, that's right, we can do this. Question objects filter question underscore text underscore dunder starts with what? Oh, that's like a actual like query that we're doing stuff now. That's pretty interesting. We can include,
Fact it is a query, like it's called a query set.
yeah. And so if we had multiple questions in there that had what's or what, they would all come back.
A set of them.
Interesting.
I believe, I don't know if the tutorial's gonna do it, but if you stick that thing in a variable, you'll get a query set object. And I think you can run .query on it, and it'll tell you the SQL that it would run to actually do the query. So it's generating a where clause, if you know database SQL stuff, and it's figuring all that out from your model, and it's just putting all that together for you, so that you don't have to write the actual SQL. Try printing, do a repr or something. There it is. So it's just a select statement with a where clause.
Interesting. I think I imported time zone. Yep. And set the current year to time zone now year. We should, this is where we're going to see the pub date year of the current year. Oh, come back. There we go. That's the only one there that was posted this year. This will, if a request ID doesn't exist, it will raise an exemption. Yep. Lookups by a primary key is the most common case, so Django provides a shortcut for the primary key exact lookups. Following is identical to, yeah, so we did earlier the question objects get ID equals 1. In this particular case, we're using the primary key. And we're going to get back the question. Make sure our custom code works. We should be able to, oh yeah, we could do the was published recently that we created. And it was published recently as in like 10 minutes ago. True, hey, awesome. Give the question a couple of choices. The create call constructs a new choice object, does the insert statements, adds the choice to the set of available choices and returns a new choice object. Django creates a set to hold the other side of the foreign key relation. E.g., a question's choice can be accessed via the API. So we want to create a question of question objects via that primary key of 1. And we'll display all the choices. There won't be any choices because we haven't done any. We can create some choices. This is like pretty freaking cool. I'm saying that not to make you think that I think it's cool. This is pretty interesting. I see so many choices here.
Some people say that Django is like an ORM, mostly an ORM, lightly wrapped with some web stuff. Because the ORM is, and ORM, that's what we're interacting with here. It stands for Object Relational Mapper. And it's the thing that's translating Python objects to, and it's mapping them to relations. SQL is a relational database. So a lot of its power is how is it doing that stuff? And, we saw the SQL that came out of it when we looked at that query set. So it's pretty smart. It knows how to do these things. And that's why a lot of people like Django's, because this is so powerful.
This is less powerful, more easy.
Right. Yeah, you don't have to write SQL.
Yeah.
So
we just added 3 choices to this question. The API automatically follows relationships as far as you need, uses double underscores to separate relationships. This works as many levels deep as you want. There's no limit. Find all choices for any question whose pub date is in this year. So we're reusing the current year variable from above. We can do that again and it'll tell us all of the choices that we just added there. Huh. That is really, really crazy. I guess actually I'm not sure I quite understand. So it's using the current year variable that we created earlier we're creating a filter off of the question and the pub date year. Is that what that's
Yeah.
saying? Okay.
So it's figuring out the join.
Wait, actually, can't I do that again with the, am I able to do that showing the SQL again by doing test equals that. We want to do test query, and we want to print.
It's using the double underscores in that filter. And it's able to parse, it's able to parse the SQL syntax and the data model properties and the Python .year.
Yeah.
That you would call. That's actually really awesome.
And the double underscore lets you go into the like any relations. Like so if you're not using a double underscore, it assumes that you're talking about an attribute that's on the model, which is why it started with question, because that is the attribute that's on the choice model. And it's saying like go look at, do the pub date, which is what we can see this inner join somewhere here is going to look at, can't see it.
Inner join over there.
There it is. But get the right question ID and like look at the right year stuff, and I'll figure that all out.
Interesting. And let's delete one of the choices. We're going to delete the just hacking. And C dot.
Does it only do inner joins?
Sure, there's also
I think it supports other stuff. I don't remember how.
For more information on model relations, see,
So I honestly don't keep much track of the SQL because I rarely ever have to like look at it.
we can click on accessing related objects, but we don't need to worry about that. Let's look at the Django admin. Creating an admin user.
We want to do a time check of like,
It's 8:09.
how about, I'm wondering if like, because we haven't even touched on how do you hook the ORM into the view? Like we've introduced two separate concepts and we've been going at it for a while.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if it makes sense to like maybe look at the admin and then stop there and revisit this like in a follow-on session. Are people up for that idea? I just want to, you guys all already been here for a while, and if suddenly have to go, I want to respect that.
Yeah. Okay. Introduction to the Django admin. Generating admin sites for your staff or clients to add, change, delete content is tedious work that doesn't require much creativity. For that reason, Django entirely automates creation of admin interfaces. So let's create an admin user.
How difficult is it to set up, how difficult is it to set up HTTP pass?
Oh, you
Not
can bypass it.
difficult.
There we go.
There are settings that help support it. It's usually at your web server level above that. But if you want to add, like, I don't know how much you know about
Web
it.
server, I thought Django was the web server.
Django is the web application that gets deployed into it. It's like the
Oh, so it's
relationship
not actually a
between,
web server.
no.
It has a development web server, which we run that, but that's not what is used
Right.
in production.
So you know Java. I know you're a Java guy. It's the relationship with Tomcat and war files. It's the same sort of notion.
So how does that work when you deploy it into microservices?
Zappa is doing a lot of magic to bundle that up in interesting ways. I'll probably have to leave that one there.
So I created an admin user. We're going to go back into the development server and look at the admin UI. And if you can see that password is too similar, if you can guess the password that I used for the admin user, you get nothing. All right, so we have the development server running again. We should be able to go to this URL, which is the admin URL. And look at that. That's some cool stuff. Yeah, groups and users for site administration. Awesome. Enter the admin site, we did that. Make the pull app modifiable by the admin. But where's our pull app? It's not displayed on the admin index page. Just one thing to do. We need to tell the admin that questions objects have admin interfaces. To do this, open polls admin.py and edit it to look like this. Restart it. Oh, I didn't have to kill it because run server automatically would have picked that up. Oh well. Hey, look at that. Polls questions. What's up? Should have the, we can change the question, but it doesn't show us the what's it called? The choices inside questions, I guess, because we didn't make that available. Or maybe that's the next step. Exploit the free admin functionality. We can see, we saw the what's up question to edit. Things to note here, the form is automatically generated from the question model. Different model types. Date time field, char field correspond to the appropriate HTML input widget. Each date time field gets free JavaScript shortcuts. Dates get a today shortcut and calendar pop-up. You can save and delete things. If the value of date published doesn't match the time when you created in the question tutorial 1, it means you forgot to set the correct value and time zone. Let's see if we got it. That was pretty close, yeah. 1950, yeah, close enough. We don't need to worry about changing any of that. That's it, yeah. Doesn't show us our choices, but
My guess is that because it's a foreign key relationship, and in theory, like if you had a model that had a million work records pointing at the one thing, by default they don't want to like try and display all of that stuff in one go. There are tools that you can learn way more about the admin. The admin is super powerful, and there are tools that you can create inline things. So if you wanted to see all the choices that were associated with the question, you could certainly do that.
Cool.
I mean, by that logic, if you had a million questions, like it would be rendering all of that, right?
So on the listing page on the admin, it'll paginate, a set so that you can go in the specific one. But if you load up, like, so we went from like a list to a detail page. And even then, it sometimes gets it wrong. Like you can add that as a field to, let's say, in the example where you have a lot of questions, and you're on the other side, you're on a choice, and you want to connect the choice to a question from the admin. If you have too many of those, and you don't tell something about the admin to display it as a raw ID or something like that, it will try and query them and give you a choice list that includes all your questions, which could be way too many to load in a reasonable amount of time. So there are tools to get around that, to make it so it's just show a raw ID instead or something like that. But
So even if your data model is using the Django conventions of your simple one-to-many relationships, it won't add the admin section by default. It won't fire that up in the UI.
Right.
From an edit perspective.
Right. Because I think it's trying to play it safe.
Yeah.
But it's fairly trivial to add extra fields in there, which I don't know that this tutorial will get much into that, but maybe they will.
I was gonna make a bunch of questions while you guys were talking. I can't remember off the top of my head. 4i and range. What's the?
Range is a
Right? Oh,
You didn't save anything.
damn it.
still didn't save anything. You just brought up the bound method. You didn't actually use parens for save.
Oh, damn it.
There you go.
This is why using an IDE is so much better.
Live coding is hard.
Now we can run server again. And now we can see all the questions. Yeah. There you go. 101 questions. Perfect. All right. That was, there you go.
Cool.
That was the first
Well, I
two
guess we'll find a
tutorials.
time where we can revisit this. So the rest of the story is like, now that you've got your data, you need to be able to display it. And we haven't even talked about like rendering and templates, and there's all sorts of extra power that gives you that functionality to like loop over your data and use it in interesting ways. So I guess we'll have a follow-on session, and I don't know that it'll be next month, but it will certainly be this year, where we jump into part 3 of the tutorial.